Thank you all very much. And if it's okay, I'm going to walk down these stairs and kind of just talk, meander about. You guys will be in a hazardous area. I might step on you, so just heads up. I'll give you time to. Is this microphone working? Can everybody hear me? I think it's coming up now. So I wanted to say, first of all, that I am honored to be here. My hat's off again to this association. President Harris, thank you very much for having me be here. I don't know what it is about this conference and hurricanes and water events. Last year I was supposed to come to New Orleans, and just before they went underwater in the on the Gulf Coast again. So let's hope next year in New Orleans it's clear. Everybody have enough of that, and we can break the tie between water events and the conference. I'll just make a quick comment with reference to Sergeant Major Walls, Congressman Walls. He is a huge advocate for us. I know you know that as part of the Guard Caucus, and he has me regularly for breakfast with Congressman Palazzo and the rest, and they care about what you care about, and to have that kind of advocacy is huge for us. And I would echo his support of this association and associations and professional associations in general. I would like to say that, as professional guardsmen, as members, I too am as a life member of the National Guard Association of Texas and AUGUS. I think that this is an important part of who it is and what we do, and I fully support and look to support to a greater extent going forward the ability for us to grow in a professional way together through these associations. Secondly is, I'll just ask as I kick this off this morning that all of you keep the citizens of Texas, Houston, Louisiana in your thoughts and prayers. They got some bad stuff going on down there in Texas. The scope and scale of that, I was in Texas yesterday in Austin. I'll be back in the weekend once the recovery effort can't be wasted on hauling generals around to see floods and people and stuff like that. But they have got their hands full, and General Nichols will require what we do best, which is how we help each other and how we bring National Guard capability in time of need to our homeland. So I'll just ask that you keep those folks down there in your thoughts and prayers. I'm going to start this off with a short video that talks about us and the National Guard, and once that's done, my plan is to talk to you a little bit about kind of our history through how we came up to this operational force that we are now. I'm going to talk to you about my priorities, readiness, people, and innovation. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the future, which is where I try to spend most of my time. I want to thank Command Sergeant Major Kepner for giving you a double scoop of readiness yesterday. I know he was here. There was a piece of, there was a time when I didn't know if I was going to actually be able to get out here and do it, and he is my battle buddy, my wingman, and he is my most important advisor as the Chief of the National Guard Bureau. So if I could ask, please, to run the video, and then I'll be back with you.
There they go. They're pulling him up. He's giving him the signal to hoist him up.
There it is. The plane went right through the other tower of the World Trade Center.
I'm here because of patriotism, because I love my country.
Troops with the Massachusetts National Guard were among the first on the scene after two powerful bombs exploded yesterday near the finish line of the Boston Marathon. It's extraordinary firepower.
It was a sense massive accomplishment and achievement. It's something I work hard and diligent for.
It brought me into something that became a family and not just a job.
This is a new training for me. I've never been overseas anywhere, so this is my first time outside of the U.S., learning other courtesies, customs, and learning how people do things.
Training over here in Poland, they are building readiness.
It's something I'm going to be very proud of going home. This is a memory I'm going to share with my kids and my grandkids.
The Guard answered every call, met every challenge, accomplished every single mission it was given.
I'm sitting here believing now in the 21st century, after 3 years in the job as Chief of the National Guard Bureau, that it is now in the best interests of the American people for the Chief of the National Guard to be made a full member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
The National Guard must be maintained as an operational force.
The response time is quick, working with them is quick, the professionalism is unreal, and they stay till the job's done.
The National Guard is there, and we're trained, and we're ready.
Show everybody that we need to come join, and that we're not just little weekend warriors, we're a lot more than that.
It's what we do in the National Guard.
And there they both go to safety. That's pretty impressive if you ask me.
So I kind of wish we had another 45 minutes of that to watch instead of you listening to me. But I am struck by the time frame that we start up there. General Blum, the 25th Chief of the National Guard Bureau. General McKinley, the 26th Chief of the National Guard Bureau. General Frank Rass, the 27th, and now me, the 28th. And I guess I'm just getting old, but it seems like yesterday to me that General Blum was on TV talking about Katrina, was talking about bringing the Guard and making it relevant in this country as that essential dual status, dual mission force that we have become. So I think it's impressive. As I talk to you right now today, there are 30,229 members of the National Guard who are on duty, on status, and that doesn't count right now today the growing Texas contingent, which by the end of tomorrow will probably be another 10,000. They are in every combatant command. They are on every continent right now of the United States, and they are doing things that only the operational force that we are has become. We have become an operational force, this operational piece of our Army and Air Force, and as a member of the Joint Chiefs, my advice to our leadership, to the President, to the Chairman, to the Secretary of Defense, is that whatever we do going forward, whatever force we build, of which this association represents the biggest part, we would not want to build a force that doesn't count and rely on this force as an operational force. We will never, ever, should never go back to being a strategic reserve as we once were. Not that it wasn't a valued part of our force. Next slide. I think that, you know, I show this slide, the New York National Guard 100 years ago this fall in World War I. And I don't know that I was so aware of how much the National Guard was represented and a piece of that, but as a newly part of the force, as a federally regulated militia, which is a new piece of the force, was kind of relatively new in 1918. we had over 400,000 men and women that were engaged in the force. And at the time, mostly men, but women as well. And we had 18 divisions, more than 400,000 people. And I thought that as I read more about this and learned more about this and saw that 100,000 casualties, numbers that we can't comprehend today, 20,000 plus of those were deaths. You know, you think about the utilization of the force and the piece of that, and that part of making the Army large and big and defending the nation, the time in that nation when we had time to mobilize the force and send it overseas. The National Guard was among the very first folks that were deployed to World War I, and it's a great legacy of who we are and what we do. Next slide, please. You know, that kind of came back. We came back from the war, from World War I. We disbanded, we demobbed as individuals. The units kind of weren't maintained. We weren't yet the operational force that we were, but we mobilized again early before we deployed for World War II. And again, at that time, we were a little smaller, 300,000 men and women of the National Guard mobilized. It was a total mobilization. Everyone is in until the end of the war plus 6 months. And that's the way we mobilized and went. 29 squadrons, still then a part of the Army, hadn't broken away yet as part of the United States Air Force. But again, a great legacy, and this is the Alabama 106 Recon Squadron mobilized in the Pacific for World War II. Next slide, please. So we came back from the war after World War II, and we began to, this is the beginning of the total force, where we begin not to talk about it, but to utilize it and such. And as I show this squadron here from New York, and we came back, and New York and California maintained almost immediately an alert posture to maintain the air defense capabilities of the United States and protect our airspace. They came on alert. They had 5 separate crews. They sat alert in the morning from an hour before sunrise to an hour after sunset. That was the nature of the threat. That was the nature of our ability and effort to defend it. We continued to grow this. I mean, by the time we got into the 70s, we had 25 squadrons in the Air National Guard who were actually on alert and part of the air defense mission of the United States. And they were all part of the reserve component that was using it. That was the beginning of the Air Force and its continued and regular operational use of our force as part of the operational use. They didn't call it that yet. They didn't resource us like that yet. They didn't train us like that yet. We weren't yet the professional force that we are today. But that was the beginning of the force. And, you know, one of the first incidents that happened to me as I became the chief last August 3rd was, you know, shortly thereafter we had the incident with the California National Guard and the strategic and the bonus issue that came up. And I got a call from then, at the time, he had not yet passed away, but Secretary of Defense Melvin Laird. And Melvin Laird was the Secretary of Defense in the early 80s. He was the father of the all-volunteer force. And he yelled at me and he says, "General, what are you doing to my all-volunteer force? You're ruining my force." And I said, "Well, sir, we're going to fix this, I promise." And unfortunately, he passed away 2 weeks later, and he didn't get to see us actually resolve the California National Guard issue. But it was a vision that he had that was to utilize the reserve component, to begin this all-volunteer force, do away with the draft, to properly resource us, properly train us, and make us be part of the force that we are today. Next slide, please. So this force here as 16, you know, to the post-9/11 force that we've become, 850,000 mobilizations. We now, because of that, have the trust of our active component services. And one of the reasons that I stress so hard the need to maintain this is, as the 28th chief, I can tell you that my relationship with the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and the Chief of Staff of the Army is probably as good a relationship as we've ever had from the National Guard CNGB relationship. The services trust us, they rely on us, they need us. And it's not out of a sense that they wanted to use us. It's just the Air Force and the Army have shrunk. The demands on the Army and the Air Force have continued to expand. The global requirements on the force, the threat is such today with Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, violent extremists that is not going to go anytime soon. They must use us. And when they use us, then they want to invest in us, and they want to buy our equipment, and they want to train us, and they want to develop all of you so that you are competent, combat, lethal killers when you get to the battlefield. Lethal word, Sergeant Major. We got to be lethal in what we do. And I think that concept of us, that is who we are now, that we do focus on our training, and we do understand the ability to be ready and to train, and I've seen a lot of it myself in the recent time, as I'll talk more about here in a minute. Next slide, please. So I'm kind of skewing my talk here, but I thought I'd push this to the forward piece of this as Hurricane Harvey. You know, this homeland piece, I say we do three things, and I'll end this with the medallion that I hope you've all seen. But normally, when I talk about this, I talk about warfight, homeland, partnerships, people. Those are the things that we talk about. And I'm going to go to the homeland piece of this thing because I saw it myself yesterday. You're seeing it on the news today. We derive all of our homeland capabilities and response capabilities by doing our homeland mission, by doing our warfight mission. All of those tasks that the Texas National Guard are doing, the rescue helicopters from California and Nevada that are pitching in, the Chinooks from all the other countries, all of the other states that are coming in, they are using their warfighting training, their warfighting equipment, their warfighting skills to do a mission in the homeland that we can do under the command and control of the governors and the adjutants general. And I think that is what makes us so unique. And this event in Texas, and again, I want you to leave here with the assumption that the event in Texas is real, it's big. Today we'll have 10,000 National Guard folks in there. This could easily exceed the response that we had to Katrina and the water event from that. It could get that big over the coming weeks and months. My hope is, I say with some certainty next year when this conference meets, they will still be doing recovery operations from this operation in Texas, and hopefully not Louisiana. It's moving to the east. What else is on this slide? Things that only we can do. The Pararescue Squadron from New York, the 106 Pararescue Squadron. That aircraft flew 1,200 miles out over to the ocean to a ship that was on fire, and people parachuted out of that aircraft and they dropped down onto a ship, and they saved the crew and they saved that ship. And it was a skill set that our pararescue folks that we're extremely proud of, and it's an extremely professional, well-trained organization, but those are combat skills that they're using in a domestic homeland response. Absolutely. So this cyber exercise that you're seeing here on the Cyber Shield in 2017, I think that as an airman, as a general, I can tell you that we are changing. The battle space is changing, and we have to recognize that. And you know, that's one of the core messages of this speech, is that, you know, the skill sets that we do today, the way we're formed, if you think back to how much we've changed from that first slide of World War I 100 years ago, and it changed some to World War II, and it changed again a little bit faster to Vietnam when we became the total force. But it is changing right now as I speak to you so fast. It is such a dynamic, changing operation. We live in a world now that the cyber battle space, it is its new and owned domain. We are under attack every day in the cyber battle space. There is a huge domestic dual status, dual capability piece of this. I think that most of you are aware that the discussion for CST-like civil support teams and cyber CST organizations are new and part of how we have to adapt as a National Guard. So responding in the homeland is something that we do, and we do it better than anyone else. Next slide, please. So this thing, the partnerships piece of this, and this falls again right in line with General Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, and his priorities. I know the Sergeant Major told you yesterday that, General Mattis's priorities are readiness of the force, and that's lethality. That is our ability to do our job, to make people not want to go to war with us. The second thing that the Secretary wants to do is build and grow partnerships, not just the current ones we have, but the new ones that we have. And I take that to obscene levels of craziness with us, because of the partnerships we have in our homeland, with our communities, with our schools, with our services, with our partnerships with our services to do it. This is it. But as you look at this slide here, you see some pretty neat things. You see, the Maryland 175th Wing engaged in operations in the Baltics. You see a JTAC from Latvia up there involved in the top of this thing. You see folks from Maryland working here in the middle as other JTACs in the Baltics and exercises going on. So I think it is just an incredibly important piece of who it is and what we do. And as we become more ready and we think about being more lethal, and we see our state partnership programs move towards building combat capability and training towards those kinds of things, it's a great tool for the Department of Defense to move to the next level in our partnerships development here. I'll just add that the partnerships have been extremely prolific. Everybody wants them. Every time I talk to a combatant commander, he talks to me about wanting more partnerships in his command. He knows the greatest thing that we bring is the development of the enlisted corps when we talk about that in terms of what we bring to the training of the forces over there. And we just signed our 80th partnership with the great state of Washington and Malaysia this month. So I'm looking forward to continuing that to go ahead. Next slide, please. So the war fight. This is the meat. This is why we get $26 billion of Department of Defense money. Interesting in this slide here, first of all, we're not at war in the Ukraine. Let me make sure that doesn't come across here as Ukraine. But what I'm talking about is operational mission sets. So the Vermont National Guard has become renowned for what they did this past February when they deployed with. Every time I tell this story, I seem to knock a day or two off how long it took them to get there. I think it was originally 34 days from idea to conception to landing in Kuwait to dropping bombs in Mosul and Raqqa. And they landed their F-16s. There are 300 airmen, all on volunteer mobilization status because they couldn't make the process work any faster. They got there in 34 days. They got there with all of their equipment and their people, and 14 hours after they landed, they were dropping bombs on ISIS. That's something. That is impressive. And for Operation Inherent Resolve, and in the next 3 months, they flew more than a year's worth of sorties. And dropped thousands of bombs and killed lots of bad guys. I'm very proud of that unit and that organization. And then I have up here as an example the 45th Infantry Brigade Combat Team from Oklahoma doing training and advising in the Ukraine. Again, we are not at war with the Ukraine, but it is an example of bringing the combat capability recognized in our National Guard to our partners and our allies and our friends around the world, and that's a very important piece, and we're doing it all over the world. And talk about my priorities. Next slide, please. First and foremost, things about what we do. And this is where I need feedback from you, and I'll be looking for it in questions or comments as we do it. Is I'm beating the drum as a member of the Joint Chiefs that we are an operational force, and we want to stay an operational force. And that when people tell me that the National Guard needs to take a knee, that we're working too hard, that we can't keep our Armored Brigade combat teams at the level of readiness we need to mobilize fast enough to get to war to make a difference. I just want to let you know how the battle space is changing. We in the Pentagon talk about it as the changing nature of the character of war. And what that means is that it's different. It's not fought in any one continent anymore. It's global. It's not fought on any one domain, like not just in land or air or sea or space or cyber or undersea, that they're all interconnected, and that we as a country, we used to be kind of safe over here in the United States. We could build big armies and big force structure, and we could power project to where we needed to use it. And there are people who are starting to question that this now is an invulnerable place to live and grow and build readiness. And that can we really have this big army that's new and well equipped? And can we deploy it? I mean, you think about it, I watched what it took to get some of our National Guard forces to train in Europe over the summer. And it's a long operation to drive our stuff to Beaumont, put it on a boat, ship it to Europe, drive it off the boat, get the shipboat, get the people over there and ready to use it. I mean, it takes a lot of time. And we can be attacked in this country. We are not invulnerable. There are adversaries who can, not just nuclear war, but conventional cruise missiles and the like. We are no longer invulnerable here. And the ability to build readiness so it's ready fast enough and can move fast enough is what we do. And I think that, you know, our business model is what it is. We are, and want to be, citizen soldiers and airmen. And what we need to do is we need to be able to build readiness, build it fast enough, sustain it long enough, deploy and do a mission, come back and go into dwell. And you need a predictable dwell that is generally 5 times longer than the period with which you were deployed. That's what I tell people. And we have to not break faith with employers. We have to not break faith with families, because you are the men and women who are our force. And NGB exists for only one reason. They exist to support the field. They exist to support the M-Day soldier and airman so that you can do your civilian job, bring your civilian skill sets, and come back and be a full-up, lethal warrior who's ready to go do their jobs. So I'm looking forward to hearing some of your thoughts. How can we be more ready? Some of the things that I'm looking at as the chief, and General Cademy and General Rice are looking at in terms of what is it that impacts our readiness. It is, first of all, being part of the operational force. We need to be regularly part of training missions like the NTC and like the JRTC. We need to continually have operational relevant rotations that utilize us, that test us, that stress our systems. We need regular and routine. We don't want to train and be set on the shelf for another 10 years and not use. We want to deploy. What is it that makes us more ready? I believe, and I've told Congressman Walz this, and I've told other members on the Hill this, and I testified to it, that we need more full-time support in the Army National Guard. I believe that full-time support is what builds our readiness at the foundational level. Without our foundational full-time support, we can't be ready. We don't have the foundation, the institution to train the part-time force when they roll in, and she rolls in from her drill weekend, for her drill weekend, to go into the field and train in her combat skill set. So we need the full-time support that makes sure whatever it is that they're going to train, it's up and ready. Whatever the equipment or platform is, that it's working and it's ready to be used. Whatever the range space for our full-time support, they maintain the facilities and the force that we do it. We have to increase the pre-mobilization training and quality time. Do we need an increase in training days? Well, we're already doing an increase in training days. Is every MOS going to need more than 39 days? No, but some will. Some will need rotational, more training days, and I know many of you are out there that know it, and I know I get asked by Congress, can they sustain it? Can the Guard sustain this without breaking your business model? We are fundamentally a different business model, and I think we can do it, but this is new ground, this is new territory, this is the first cycle of running the sustained readiness model, and we have to watch it and we have to pay attention to it. So Sergeant Major and I were recently in 2 places. We recently saw some readiness being built at Fort Polk in the JRTC, and back at Fort Hood, folks on AT doing some stuff. Hey, as a 28th Chief of the National Guard Bureau, I pulled the lanyard on a 105 howitzer, man. Kaboom! I was on the firing line. And the sergeant came up and he gave me a brief, and here's what you're going to do. Sit right here. And I straddled the pole. He goes, don't do that. Sit on the side. Do this. And I sat on the side, and then he goes, I'm going to tell you what to do. He's going to lay off a bunch of things, and then you're going to pull. He was there yelling at me, and Okay, boom. You know, I think he said fire, so I pulled it. Boom, off it went downrange, and it was awesome. What a synchronized team effort it was on that weapon to do it, and I was proud to see it. Okay, next slide, please. People, I'm continually amazed about this people. Okay, so this is A1C Andrews from the New York National Guard. The people and the experiences that come with us, they're just amazing. I mean, they are, so this is one of what they call the lost boy. He grew up in the Sudan. He was captured and trained and put into basically slavery as a warrior for bad people. And he came out and somehow got to the United States, and he became a part of the Air National Guard. And he is just one example of who we have meet. I was in Georgia last week, and I met A1C Chowdhury. He was getting ready to go off to officer candidate school. The kid had just immigrated 5 years ago from India. He had 5 degrees, 2 of them master's degrees. He was in law school. He spoke 5 languages. Where do we get these kinds of people? And it is our strength. And sometimes I talk about our business model and I talk about who we are. It's all of you. It's that part-time M-Day soldier, and people talk about the part-time airman as if he is, or soldier as if they're a weakness. And I talk about it, no kidding, as if they are a strength. They are our strength. They bring a skill set. They bring experience. They bring a thought process, a way of seeing problems that is different than our brothers and sisters in the active component. So I'm very proud of the people who we have in the National Guard, and they are you. Next slide. So again, with my priorities here of readiness and people, this people piece is, this is the 29th ID returning from a deployment in Kuwait. We have got to maintain your time. You know, the time you have to train is your most important commodity, and I can't make more of it. So when you show up for your drill weekend, it is important that we and the services and the Army National Guard and the Air National Guard don't waste it. And I completely support the Secretary Mattis's vision of removing non-readiness building activities from what it is that you have to do. And I think, you know, I can tell you that, you know, ever since I've been in the military, since I was a captain in the military, we've been talking about ancillary training and the things that take a drain on our time, and they make it impossible for us to train for our wartime mission. You know, what we need people to do is to take care of their families, to be able to fit into their business model of their employers so that they don't have to make a choice between being in the Guard and being in whatever it is their civilian occupation needs to be. But people need to be taken care of here, and as Congressman Walz mentioned to you, 12304 Bravo is a big deal, and I'm thankful that part of that has been fixed. And with this Veterans Forever Act, I think that's just passed, is going to fix the ability to use the post 9/11 GI Bill benefits with that authority. It's going to fix the ability to get TRICARE Reserve Select or TRICARE benefits, medical benefits for the post-mob. There's some other things it doesn't fix. It doesn't fix yet, as I understand, the ability to adjust your retirement date based on active duty. But just in general, the equivalent, the benefits parity of the various different statuses is something that I and my staff watches very closely on your behalf, and we can partner together to make sure that that works. Okay. Next slide, please. Innovation. So again, in line with Secretary Mattis's priorities, I waited to see his before I developed mine. I'm no stupid, I'm no dummy. You know, I want to see what the boss had before I came out with mine. So the Secretary Mattis came out, and his, you know, readiness, alliances, and reform is what he came out with. Innovation. Innovation is not just a buzzword. It's not just something that we do, but it's innovation to make us more ready. It's innovation to find out how we can free up resources to do things better and smarter and faster and cheaper so that you're not wasting your time. It's innovation across the board for how we can change how we train, organize, train, and equip, and fight. When I became the chief, I said, hey, 28th Chief of the National Guard, fundamentally different than any chief before me. I'm just telling you that as the role of the chief has changed, my access, it's not me, but it's the position, my access has been now, I've seen the president myself now, I think 6 times. I mean, spoken to him, seen him. You know, the amount of times that I'm with him where we can talk about it and he asks about the National Guard and what we need, it's just higher than it has ever been. Same thing with the Secretary of Defense, same thing with the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Our ability to have access. And I said, our staff hasn't really changed to support it. How is it that you know, I'm telling you, it's challenging. You know, and I'll share with you as part of your professional development, you know what a Joint Chief does? A member of the Joint Chiefs, it is code word for a military advisor. That's what I am. I am a military advisor to the President of the United States or the Secretary of Defense or the Chairman. That is what we do. When I put on my Joint Chiefs hat, I am looking up and I am telling people above me, this is my best military advice to you. All of the other members, the Chief of the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and the Chairman and the Vice Chairman, they all have that same hat that they occasionally put on. They take off their service hat, my guard hat, I take it off and I have all the experiences as a guardsman, but I then convey to them what I think my best military advice is. And their questions that range across the spectrum of whatever you might think it would be is how do we deal with North Korea? Or how do we consider campaign plans for Russia and China and Iran? And whatever the policies, generally policies aren't necessarily in it in terms of how we do it, but they can be. In terms of transgender issues and integration issues and all of the big things you read about in the paper that happen in the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs sit around a big table in a room called the tank and we talk about them. So is my staff structured right to do that? I think it's important that we look and we try to make the changes that we need to have happen. I think that I took a look at the staff and I said, look at the NGB. What can we change so that I can get better advice from my staff? It takes a while to grow the people that can help me come up with good ideas and good thoughts and give best military advice, and we're doing that. So looking at ourselves was first. Next slide. So I created, and there may be a member or two in here. Is anybody in here a member of the National Guard Innovation Team? Guard Sergeant Major, he's available of every team. So National Guard Innovation Team. So I have a team that has 28 people on it. They came from the States, and this is a rank agnostic. Sitting in that picture right there are general officers, senior enlisted, some senior NCOs, some airmen, some soldiers. It's a cross-section of who we have from our National Guard. And what I use this team for is, I mean, these people are rock stars in the civilian world. These people own engineering companies. These people are marketing executives. These people are physicians. There's a music professor from Georgetown University on this slide. Some people that are amazingly capable people in their civilian life. My goal was, because as I talked about innovation, people tell me, General Lengyel, you don't have an innovation problem, you have an implementation problem. You have all kinds of great ideas, but you don't have an ability to get anything done because it gets buried in the bureaucracy. So these guys are supposed to come up with good ways, good thinking, good new ideas of how to do things, how to fix things, and then bring them directly to me and I can implement them. And the first thing they talked about was communications. And so several people who are strategic communication directors and marketing executives came up to us about how do we communicate better as an entity, as a National Guard. They came up with some great ideas, and some of those are en route to getting implemented as they were. The second thing I did, next slide, is we partnered with an organization called MD5. MD5 is a technology accelerator that was started by the Department of Defense about 2 years ago when Secretary Carter came in. And their job is to match up ongoing technology with people who can take it and apply it to problems in the Department of Defense. If you go to my Facebook page today, you'll see on there a slide that looks like this. You'll see Command Sergeant Major Kepner and myself give a small video on a Chief's Challenge that we're talking about here. We have partnered with the Veterans Administration. It's a crowdsourcing event, and the Veterans Administration wants to find better ways to communicate with you to make sure that you are getting all of the benefits that you're entitled to. And I would ask that if you're inclined to look at some of these things, take a look at this, go to that website, participate in the crowdsourcing event, and see if we can't find new and better ways to communicate. So I'm excited about this. We've sponsored several hackathons now with MD5 hackathons where we come together and try to solve problems and various groups compete. We recently had one in Boston, and it was won by a group from the Ohio National Guard who came in and found better ways to use technology fabric, a fabric you can put on and it can sense all kinds of things on the battlefield. So have a look at that and please do it. Next slide, please. So this is what I spend most of my time thinking about or trying to. And I'm going to tie this back to the video. So that was I'm trying to think about what are we going to look like in 2030. And if you go back, 13 years, that's 2004. General Blum was the chief of the National Guard Bureau. That wasn't very long ago. But if you think about how much has changed between now and then, I think it's astounding. I think they didn't stop putting phone booths out there until 2007, and we didn't have the smartphone until 2008, and we didn't have Uber, and we didn't have Airbnb, and we didn't have, hey Alexa, did the Red Sox win last night? They did, by the way, in case anyone's checking. And our lives have changed immensely in the last 13 years. And if I think about 2030, I'll still be a relatively young guy, I hope. I'll be here visiting this conference. I'll be 70-something, early 70s, and I'll be just like General Blum is coming to our conferences and thinking about those things. But what will have changed between now and then? And what are we going to do as an institution to change between now and then? What pieces of our force structure are no longer going to be relevant? And I don't know the answer to that question. But I do know that right now, as I talk to you, there's a National Defense Strategy review going on. And they're looking at a world in which we're going to be fiscally constrained. We're looking at a world in which we're no longer the only superpower in the world. We're looking at a world in which China's budget, if projections are right, will roll well past us, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Our qualitative military advantage over the Chinese in the Pacific or any place else around the world is going to change. And no, we don't have enough money to stop that. They're stealing our technology. They're ramping up their intel or their industrial base for their military spending. And we're the only ones they have to worry about. We have to worry about everybody else. They have a much easier problem, but they're growing and their influence in the Pacific. And are our partnerships and our force structures going to be relevant? Are we going to be able to keep force structure relevant in the Army National Guard and the Air National Guard and get it to the fight in time to make a difference for our nation? So these are the things we're looking at. And in the next 10 years, you're going to see artificial intelligence. You're going to see robotics. You're going to see completely changed numbers of unmanned platforms. You're going to see increased utilization with space. You're going to see increased utilization with cyber. And I think that it's important for us to realize that 13 years is not long. And as an organization and as an entity, we have to be willing to look and we have to be willing to change. And other than that, if we don't, we will perish as an organization. And we have to be leading edge, and that means we have to make hard decisions, and that means we have to be willing to accept change inside our formations. And I don't know what they are now, but I'm just telling you, as this strategy changes, as the threat changes, as resources change, as warfare changes, we have to be willing to accept it. And that's kind of the key message that I think I wanted to bring with you. I've been talking too long. Next slide. Yep, I don't know what that is, but, you know, my God. Next slide. So I have to end on this. First of all, thank you all very much for what you do. I know what you do. I've been a part-time M-Day airman. Sergeant Major's been a part-time M-Day soldier. We've had civilian careers. We've had to balance two lives. We've deployed to combat, and we've done what we do here in the homeland, and we can't do it without all of you. And what I need from you is your continued commitment. I need you to tell me what you need so we can make you ready. I need you to make this our brand. This is our brand up here. And I'll be darned if it's not an effective way to talk about what we do. We are 20% of the joint force in our nation. 20%. When you add up the 2 million people who are in uniforms, 450,000 of them are National Guard. And we're in every state, territory, in the District of Columbia. And we're going to be, no matter what goes on out there, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, violent extremisms, we're going to be there. And then when we're not there, when you're training to be there, you're going to be in Texas, in Houston, helping people recover for what that is. Or whatever else the future threats might bring. When they decide how or learn technology changes and they can miniaturize weapons of mass destructions and bring them into our nation and threaten us, it'll be us that has a big part of keeping us safe. And you're going to keep building partnerships. You know, right here, warfight, homeland, and you have partnerships with everybody you need to do those other two things, then you're well on your way to being the leader that you need to be. And it's that person in the middle, whoever she is in 2030 Bureau. And we need a trainer, and she needs an environment that's free and fair and open and free of sexual harassment and sexual assault and professional. And we can do it because we're the National Guard. So it's an honor for me to speak to you guys today. Readiness, hooah. And, you know, it's an honor to be the 28th Chief. I talked too long. I'll take a few questions if you want me to, but thank you all very much. Thank you. You want me to take questions, Jim? Thanks, everybody. Have a seat. Let me see if I can get a couple questions in before I got to fly back to Washington and answer questions about Hurricane Harvey. Does anybody have anything? Please.
Thanks for coming, sir. Sergeant Major Mike Gruntz from Alaska. I appreciate what you said about readiness and manning in the Army National Guard. Right now, we're manned at 61% on the managed level of resources. And my response, which was shot down, is I'll give you 61% readiness. So